Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the BBBN podcast. Today was episode. Not today. What am I talking about, bro? This week was episode. What was it? Episode 12 of season 7 of BattleBots, and I finally got around to recording the episode. Ultimately, this was a fantastic episode, and I'm really proud of the season so far. This has been a really solid season of BattleBots, and this was a great episode from start to finish. Had some very interesting fights, had some very interesting results, and we'll get to that as we go on in the episode. But make sure you like and subscribe, comment about how bad my tier lists are, not my tier list, my power rankings, and let's get into this. Let's get into this. So we're gonna start off with, obviously the opening fight, which was Quantum and Emulsifier. Now both robots have put on shows in the past. Quantum going in 3-0, you have the win against Captain Shredderator. Like all of its wins have been pretty dominant, and Emulsifier is going into this fight 1-2 with the win over Banshee and losses over Malice and Fusion. And this is a robot that could have potentially went 3-0 if gone into this match 3-0 if some of the reliability issues were fixed, and if the Fusion fight went in a different way. We all remember it just dying in Malice, and not and I feel like Malice and it dying, it was foreshadowing to this fight because it kind of just died at the end of the fight. But that's not to hold anything back off of Emulsifier, because honestly, Emulsifier was doing a great job in the fight. I did pick Quantum to win this fight. I should say that I went over my predictions. I believe we went 5-2. Quantum, or maybe I went 4-3. I picked Quantum to win over Emulsifier. But I did see something similar to, I believe, when Quantum fought Death Roll. Death Roll was able to knock some of the teeth out, and then control the fight after that in 2019. And that is what happened, at least at the beginning. Quantum does what Quantum does best, and clamp and drive a robot into the screws or into the wall or next to the pulverizer. But that doesn't mean Emulsifier didn't do a terrible job. Emulsifier, I mean, this wasn't the most impressive that we've seen out of Emulsifier. I think you would say Fusion was the most impressive. But for a bit, I was a little on the ropes with Quantum, because that main part of what it's good at is being a clamper and being able to just sink its teeth into robots, and that's very impactful and very substantial for it to do. And that's how it wins fights, is if you remove that ability. Yes, it can still like pressure down on something, but it could still just, it can't do much after that. And Emulsifier was able to do that pretty early on, and it was able to get some decent shots in against Quantum as well. But Quantum does what Quantum does best: clamp onto something in the other robot and drive it around and sort of wear it out. And this was not like a shock ending by any means. Like, I definitely think that a lot of people had Quantum to win. If you picked Emulsifier, that's like that's a far out pick, and I kind of respect you for that. But Emulsifier just kind of died at the end, and it just kind of stopped moving, and it was like, oh, that's interesting. It was radio frequencies, which was interesting, and you can see the main driver running around just trying to get a different frequency. And I mean, it worked for a little bit. It got back up and it started moving again, but then second time it was kind of kaput dunzo. I already, where did I not give it a lock? I definitely gave it a lock beforehand. I don't know where it went. Where did the lock go? We're fixing that. I think it was already a lock to begin with. I just don't know why it didn't. Oh no, because it was at 6, and I didn't move it up anywhere. But when it comes to rankings, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do this early. I'm gonna move Huge up. Actually, I'm gonna muse. I'm gonna muse. I'm gonna move Huge down to 5 for now. I think, and then I'm gonna put Quantum at 4. I think with how the rest of the season is gonna shake up, it's gonna end up controlling one of the quadrants because Minotaur and Witch Doctor still have to fight. But definitely, it is a top 4 robot right now. I mean, it's a top 5. It's dependent on what you would, if you would rank it ahead of Huge. I would, at least at this point. And then you have Emulsifier. There's a decent shot. Not a decent, but there is a okay-ish shot that Emulsifier cracks it in the top 32. It's definitely in that bubble range. And I mean, we wouldn't be even making this argument if it beat Fusion and Malice, or even if it beat Malice. I would think that there is a good probability of it getting in if it just doesn't die in that Malice fight and continues to kick Malice's teeth in. As for where we're gonna put it, I don't remember where I had it before. I think I might have had it at like 37. Or something. I feel confident putting it over Mammoth at this point, but definitely on the bubble. Currently, it's one of my first 4 out. Big Doe's one of my first 4 in. That's a little nutty to think about, but let's move on to our next fight. Endgame Gigabyte. There wasn't much to talk about this fight. Let's be real, there isn't a ton of things to talk about other than endgame weapon good, endgame weapon powerful, endgame weapon go boom and destroy Gigabyte in literally like one giant massive hit. Very akin to when Hypershock beat Gigabyte. It was sending parts of Gigabyte all over the place, and then when Gigabyte landed, Gigabyte couldn't work anymore. Like, very quick fight, very like, you can't like make fun of Endgame for how it performed. It did what it had to do, and it did it well enough to, just get the win. It did well enough to get the win, and like you can't say that. I mean, you can't say that it was bad. I mean, a 2-2 end game is very interesting to think about. It was already a lock to begin with, but this definitely shores up Endgame's spot in the round of 32 for sure. This is a fight that it concisely won, and it wasn't Chris, it was Kenny still saying that Endgame was the favorite. I'm not quite sure if I believe that anymore. I'm not quite sure that I believe that. Endgame will fall. I mean, in the tournament, there's just too much competition to say that Endgame will be able to run through the gambit because it's gonna have a lower seed. It's gonna have some issues. Just when it comes to having matchups, because if it's like a 10 seed, its second fight will end up being like maybe a 7th seed or something like that, and then it's gonna have a tough road to make it. It's not gonna be the top dog in everywhere that it goes. It's not gonna end up doing that, and like as much as some people say that BattleBots is rock paper scissors, it really isn't. I mean, you can't really predict what's going to happen in any one fight. But when it comes to ranking them, I can see BattleBots calling it up. There's a couple robots that I would say call it up if there aren't enough like BattleBots that end up in like 4-0 BattleBots to fill out the top 4. I can definitely see Endgame being that 4th to the first 3-in-1 robot that they consider, and I think I said it either in this podcast or the Green Square Talks BattleBots that it was gonna be either Endgame or Hydra. Last week Hydra would be the one that they call up first or second. I think Endgame ends up being another one that they call up on, and then I think the third one would be whoever wins Mitch Doctor and Witch Doctor and Minotaur. As for Gigabyte, I think it's out. Um, your only win is against Starchild, who is the worst robot in the field, by a pretty good margin. You could say Kraken is the worst, and I would be okay with that. But I mean, it didn't look its only fight that it looked good in was the Starchild fight. That's not true. It did good against Bloodsport, and I'll put it above those robots who didn't perform in other fights. Gigabyte did kind of perform in Bloodsport, but it is in like this like outrange. I don't think it has a good shot of making it in. It could because it's Gigabyte though. Like name recognition could get it in there, but performance wise it's not there. I don't think it's easily justifiable to put Gigabyte at this spot at in just in 30 in the top 32. Going now to overhaul Shredded Bro, and I think this was a very interesting fight. It was a fight that I could see both sides winning. I was personally rooting for Overhaul because Overhaul like has gotten the short end of the stick every single like the most of the seasons it's been in. It's gotten the short end of the stick. The only season that it hasn't was like season 1, where like it made it to the quarterfinals, right, or something like that. Granted, there was only like 20 something bots in that season, but you know, it's the only season where I performed decently. But I faced Shredded Bro, and this is my first loss of the episode. I picked Shredded Bro, not Shredded Bro. I picked Overhaul because I was like, Shredded Bro is gonna break down and stop working in this fight, and I was wrong. I mean, I was right for a decent amount of the fight. Like, Shredded Bro couldn't get anything going. It really couldn't. Shredded Bro could not get a singular thing going in its favor during the beginning of the fight. And Overhaul took advantage. It lifted it. It shoved it into the screws. It was showing that aggressive gameplay. It was clamping. It was doing all of this stuff. That's what a control bot should do. That's what it ideally is made for. And then Shredded Bro came to life, and then Shredded Bro started attacking it pretty well. Shredded Bro, you know, the last minute was probably the best Shredded Bro would perform in, and it's probably the best that it will ever perform. Quite frankly. But, you know, the results for me were hard because I definitely felt like Overhaul controlled the match for longer. Obviously, with the grappler, you can't do that much physical damage, but you control as much as you possibly can, and you can be aggressive as much as you possibly can. Ooh. Not the hiccups during the recording. That's not good. But Shredded Bro definitely controlled that last episode, that last bit of the fight, and you know, also did more visible damage. I'm not surprised Shredded Bro won. I'm just a little upset with the outcome. You know what I'm saying? As for ranking these, let's start with Overhaul. I mean, I feel like Kenny said it best. This was like a must-win for Overhaul. I feel like it had a decent case of making it in if you're 2-2. You know, Starchild. I mean, Starchild is the worst robot, but it's still a win regardless. You have Claw Viper, where I think it outperformed more than what people were expecting. Honestly, Cobalt. You know, you kind of expected it to get like beaten and like get its shit kicked in against Cobalt. Like everyone suspected that. And then with the win, I think Overhaul makes it in. With this loss, I think it makes it out. Like, which is a little hard to see. It's a little sad to see. for it. But I don't think you look at this robot and you say, oh yeah, it deserves to be in here over like a switchback, like a 1 in 3 switchback. Actually, no, it definitely could. Let's scratch that. But there will be, once the season's over, there will be a lot of robots that you simply cannot justify. With a similar record, you simply cannot justify putting Overhaul over them in the tournament. Now we have Shred It Bro. Shred It Bro is interesting because most of the season it didn't work. It barely worked during Horizon. It barely worked during Ominous. It didn't work at all versus Lucky, and then it didn't work for the first 2 minutes of Overhaul. It probably had a like functioning amount of like time in the battle box of like 1 minute and 15 seconds because it did get that like one shot on Horizon. Like it did do that for all fairness if we are saying something good about Shred It Bro. But there's a world where Shred It Bro is where I mean the world is Shred It Bro is 2-2 and makes it into the tournament. Would I like to be a part of that world? Honestly, no. I don't see. I do see why Shred It Bro makes it in. Personally, I wouldn't put him in. I definitely would put in like a Big Dill. A Big Dill is a great example of a robot with a worse record, but performed way better than Shred It Bro ever did. I mean, when you look at the fights, I mean, 2 of its losses were because it stopped working, but it put on a great show against Mad Catter. And Mad Catter is no slouch. Mad Catter, I mean, I have it at 20 right now. That's because it's 2-2. It's a solid robot. It has a lot of power into it. And to go toe to toe with Mad Catter, that is justification enough for me alone to put it over Shred It Bro. I think this Shred It Bro will end up being either the first worst or second worst, like, ranked 2-2 robot. Who is the other 2-2 robot? I don't know. That would put it below it. I simply don't know. But it's not like it doesn't feel compelling to me in any sort of way. It doesn't speak, yes, a good 2-2 robot that deserves to be in the tournament. I don't see it. I don't see it like that. For now, on ranking alone, I'm gonna put it at 33. It is definitely one of those fringe robots I mean, there's a lot of shaking up. Just as much as there's a lot of shaking out that has to do in these top 15 seeds, there's also a ton of shaking out that has to happen for these bottom, like, 4 seeds. Like, these bottom 4 seeds are going to be very contested, and I'm going to call it now. There will be people that will be upset by the rankings. That's what's gonna happen. 100% that's what's gonna happen. There will be people that won't agree with the rankings, and I'll probably be one of them. I will end up being one of them for sure. But that's what happens. I think Shred It Bro, I don't know if BattleBots throws them a bone and B's like, Evan Arias, you've been here for the 3 seasons. Like, we're going to throw you the bone. You're 2-2. We can kind of justify putting you in here, so we will. I don't think BattleBots is that corrupt to put him in there. But, I mean, we'll see what happens. Going on to Fusion and Rotator. This was a very fun fight. This was a very fun fight to watch. One where I thought Fusion was going to win. I think this was my second loss of the episode. I don't feel like checking right now. And then I thought Fusion would win. Rotator was coming off of a ugly loss against Bloodsport, where it's tried and true strategy of just having a big honking wedge and then attacking a robot. Didn't work. That strategy didn't work. It lost, because Bloodsport is that powerful of a robot. And, Fusion can end up being pretty powerful as well, but that power can sometimes get lost for the side of reliability. And, Fusion has done a great job this season of fixing that reliability issue. And then it reverted back to Season 5 Fusion. It reverted back spectacularly to Season 5 Fusion. Um, I don't know. It did a good job. Fusion did a great job of controlling a good portion of the fight. Rotator was able to get some shots into. It was pretty back and forth. I would say that Fusion was winning before it started catching on fire. I mean, and then it started catching up on fire, and then it slowly started losing control of the robot, and then Rotator kept on getting some solid hits in, and Rotator kind of used Fusion's body against itself. I'm not surprised that Fusion didn't run the wedge, because I think they were more terrified of that vertical spinner. I mean, vertical spinners are deadly as well. I can see them wanting to wanting to worry about those vertical the drum, and I mean it worked. I mean it stopped for a majority of the fight. It was able to stop that vertical from getting anywhere, and then it would just whip around and hit it, and then Fusion would just go flying across the arena. But Season 5 Fusion, we're so happy to have you back. A tough way for you to go out, because this 1-3 record doesn't feel indicative about how Fusion has performed. It's unfortunately one of those robots that falls into that trap. I mean, you look at the most firefight, very good close match. Fusion Witch Doctor was also a really good match. Huge was a bit one-sided. Not even a bit. It was very one-sided. And then Rotator was a good back-and-forth match. One that would probably end up going to the judges if you didn't revert back to Season 5 Fusion. As for where we rank them, Fusion's another one of those 1-3 robots that I would put over Shred It Bro, but it's gonna be a little hard. It's gonna be a hard run for it. I think it will end up making the tournament. I'm not confident that it will actually make it to the dance, or have 100% chance to make it to the dance, and it may just end up fact that it's gonna have a really tough matchup coming up after it. If it is this low, it probably will end up being this low, and I mean it's a Team Waiachi bot, so it will probably make it in. As for putting in Rotator, I've been putting the solid 2-2 robots that are from good teams and good builders as locks, and Rotator is the same. It's definitely had some issues. I mean, some of its fights have been pretty lopsided in favor of other robots. Definitely, I'm going to put it as well, we're not going to get rid of Whiplash, first of all. I'm going to put it over Jackpot for now at 25. But for me, it is a lock. And now we go to the next fight, which is Scorpios and Ribot. And both of these teams have interesting stories behind them. I feel like this is the fight I'm going to talk about a good amount this episode, just because of the fact that both robots, I think, have ended up in the same boat. They've ended up in the same boat. Starting with Scorpios, it is a 2-in going into this fight. It was a 2-in-1 robot, where I mean it doesn't feel like a very strong 2-in-1. It doesn't. It didn't. You had Jackpot, which, I mean, it did really well against Jackpot, but Jackpot clearly wasn't working as what they were hoping it to. you definitely saw Jackpot struggle, and it's a new build, it's a completely new robot, so there would be issues. There was gonna end up being issues, and Scorpios took hold of those issues and performed flawlessly. Did a great job. Big Dill was a fight where Scorpios doesn't like vertical spinners, so I didn't appreciate Big Dill adding a vertical spinner and then winning most of the fight, and then Big Dill kind of stopped working, and that's where it was. So heading into this fight, it's sort of like a Malice situation, and then you lose to Sawblaze because of a questionable strategy, and then you lose like pretty immediately. So coming into this fight, this sort of had the Malice effect, where it was a 2-1 that felt like 1-2, and this fight was pretty crucial for it to making it in. Ripbot, on the other hand, going into the fight, was 0-3. But you look at this strength of schedule, and while it's not the hardest, it certainly is a very challenging one. You start off with Witch Doctor, which is terrifying. Then you have Claw Viper, which came out of nowhere and like utterly dominated a majority of the season. Then you had a Jackpot that was also 0-2, but is also a very ferocious and vicious robot. And it had its moments in all three of those fights. It had their moments on all three of those fights, especially with the Jackpot fight. But if it even had a glimpse of making it into the top 32, it had to win this fight. If it wanted to make it into the top 32, it had to win this fight. And it did. This went pretty... I think I did pick Ribot to... I think I did pick Ribot to win this. Just because Scorpios really hates vertical spinners. And they do have that new attachment. And they did bring it with them to the fight, where it's like the forklift forks, but like they're thicker and denser, and they brought it, and I'm like, okay, cool, we'll actually be able to see it against a functioning vertical spinner, because let's face it, Jackpot wasn't that functional in the fight, and outcome was very similar to if it never brought it at all. A lot of damage was getting bent, a lot of their forks were getting bent, like Ribot was able to be the more agile bot and get to the sides, and then it was just dominant for Ribot. And it was like a return to form for Ribot, which is really good for it in the sense of sort of ending your season on a high note, and say to the selection committee, hey, yo, we still got this, and we intend on being a dark horse if you want to put us in here. And then, Scorpios, I can't help but have the feeling that Scorpios is falling flat this season. Like, I can't shake the feeling, and the feeling I feel is very valid. So, when it comes to ranking these guys, I'm going to put Scorpios at 31. It's gonna end up either being one of the first ones out or one of the first 4 in. I think it'll just end up making it in. There's enough justification to put it in. I'm not going to lock it. There's still a lot that can shake out here. When it comes to Ribot, it's also another one of these robots that I would put over Shred It Bro. And for ranking, and if we're ranking as such, I will put it over Shred It Bro. So, before we go to the main event, I should talk about Terratops and Dragon King real quick. Obviously, because of the fact that this is that they're exhibition fights, I'm not going to talk to them that much in depth. But Terratops is a really good robot, and I hope it makes it into the season proper next year, because it's performing great. It's performing solid. It beat Slammo, which is a veteran bot. And then it beat Dragon King, which Dragon King is basically just different Red Devil. like the design is different Red Devil, and it did a good job of beating Dragon King. So I mean, it's definitely the best alternate so far, and if they allowed alternates to make it in, I could see Terratops being the one that sneaks in. Like honestly, that's how I view it. But now we're moving on to the main event, and what a main event it was. It was reasonably quick. It's a lot of the hilarity of this main event came from sort of the, I don't want to call it fluff, but like sort of the segment to get you hyped for the main event, where Copperhead's the brick, Copperhead's super strong, like it's well built and it doesn't die, and then it takes 2 hits and it dies immediately. Um, Definitely surprised, not necessarily surprised about this. I think I did predict Ripperoni to win this fight if I remember correctly. But it was a very fun fight. It was a very enjoyable fight. It was a fight that I could what am I trying to say? God. It was a fight I was really rooting for Ripperoni, and Ripperoni's been on a tear this season. It's been popping off the entire season. I mean, its first loss was against Gruff, but that was its only loss. It beat Endgame and then carried that momentum the entire way through the season. And, I feel like if the fight was a little prolonged, if Copperhead didn't make that driving error and overcorrected himself, that this fight could have ended up in a different way. Because there's still a lot of exploitable things about Ripperoni that robots can use and abuse. Especially, like, sort of the lifted up side. But, like, Ripperoni's driver is so good, it's not going to let it happen. And this is a robot that drives, instead of it having like a 70-pound spinner, it's driving like it only has like a 30-pound spinner. It's incredible how much technology is put into Ripperoni to make it drive like a normal bot and hit like uppercut. Like this feels like the natural evolution of uppercut, and it's beautiful. It's incredible. I love it. It's incredible. As for Copperhead, it's really interesting this season that Copperhead has ended up sort of being this one-shot robot or getting one shot. Because you look at this, Bloodsport fight, one shot. Triton fight, one shot. Kraken's the only outlier and felt like a regular Copperhead fight where it just was able to get on hits and hits. Ripperoni got one shot. And I don't think this is a trend that Copperhead wants, but it is, like, I'm picking up on the coincidences. Is it as much of a coincidence as I think, or is it an actual trend? We'll see in the tournament. We'll be seeing both of these robots in the tournament, for sure. We'll be seeing both of them in the tournament. And both of these robots were locked heading into this fight. And all of this is for seeding. And speaking about seeding, here's where I would put them. I definitely think Ripperoni deserves a top 10 seed. And, it fits right there, like nestled in there pretty well. As for Copperhead, I don't think it's going to be a lot lower than it. It's definitely above the mark of a Lockjaw. Methinks it's definitely been be above the mark of a Lockjaw. But we're gonna do something fun real quick before we head out. Make sure that they're still recording.
Bubble right now. I could absolutely see them making the. I could absolutely see them making the bracket. But then I also could see a 1 in 3 possibly overcoming them too.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally. Well, make sure you guys
God.
like and subscribe to the BBBN podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.